As we have learned, Black Americans made significant progress during Reconstruction. Perhaps the most impressive achievement of the era was the election of Black representatives to state and sometimes even federal office. This wave of Black elected officials was made possible by the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, passed by Congress in 1869, which granted Black men the right to vote. States with largely Black populations elected hundreds of Black politicians in the 1870 elections, greatly increasing the power of the Republican Party in the South. But the promise of voting rights would have been an empty one if the federal government did not enforce it. Throughout the Reconstruction period, federal soldiers and law enforcement were deployed to ensure that Black Southerners were able to vote safely. As we have seen, the Compromise of 1877 put an end to that protection, and as the federal government backed away from Reconstruction, the armed protection disappeared, and the voting rights of Black Americans went unenforced. What followed was a widespread effort, usually through violence and intimidation, to stop Southern Blacks from casting votes. The violence worked as intended. Black voter turnout plummeted. Black politicians were voted out of office, and the Republicans who had fought for racial equality were replaced with Democratic redeemer governments. To redeem means to make up for a mistake, and these leaders saw racial equality as just that, a mistake that needed to be fixed by rebuilding a white-dominated power structure. And so as soon as they regained public office, Southern Democrats began to pass new laws, not unlike the Black Codes a decade earlier, to create a second-class citizenship for Black people. These laws were known by the nickname Jim Crow, and they were meant to demean and marginalize Blacks by segregating public spaces, legalizing racial discrimination, and disenfranchising Black voters. Perhaps the most visible and insulting aspect of the Jim Crow era was segregation, which prevented Blacks from using the same public spaces and services as whites. Segregation was everywhere in the Jim Crow South, but a few of the best-known examples include segregated buses and trains, segregated bathrooms and drinking fountains, and perhaps the most damaging of all, segregated schools, which offered drastically inferior educational opportunities for Black youth.